We need to talk about what is happening on Roloff Farms right now, because if the reports we are receiving are even half true, we are looking at the single most destructive event in the history of this family. We aren't talking about a feud at a dinner table or a disagreement over a pumpkin patch contract anymore. We are talking about heavy machinery. We are talking about bulldozers lining up to erase the physical legacy of the Roloff family. And the alleged mastermind behind this plan has a name that everyone in the comments section knows all too well. This is not a drill. Sources are buzzing with what we are calling the memorial destruction theory, and it involves a secret plan that has been in the works for months. A plan to flatten Amy Roloff's original flower garden and the iconic old western town to make way for a vanity project that could change the farm forever. This is the story of the wine empire scheme, and you need to hear the details before they try to bury this story. Welcome back to LPBW Update, where we dig deeper than the cameras go to bring you the truth behind the reality TV sheen. Before we get into the heavy machinery and the confrontation that allegedly took place, let's set the stage, because you cannot understand the gravity of this situation without understanding the geography of the war being fought on that property. For over 3 decades, Roloff Farms was defined by 2 things: the whimsy of the structures Matt built for the kids, and the heart that Amy put into the home and the land. The old western town isn't just a set of wooden facades. It is the backdrop of the childhoods of Jeremy, Zach, Molly, and Jacob. It is a sacred piece of television history. And Amy's garden? That was her sanctuary. That was the one place on the farm that didn't feel like a business transaction. It was soil, roots, and life. But according to new insider theories and whispered leaks coming from the production periphery, those 2 locations have been marked for death. And the reason why will make your blood boil. The theory gaining massive traction right now is that Caryn has convinced Matt that the farm's nostalgic elements are, quote, dated eyesores. We are hearing that the narrative being pushed behind closed doors is that the rustic look doesn't sell high-ticket experiences anymore. You have to look at the financial moves Matt has been making lately. He is pivoting away from the wholesome family pumpkin patch vibe and moving toward high-end, exclusive agro-tourism. We're talking about the short-term rentals, the big house build, and now the pièce de résistance. Reports suggest that the ultimate goal has always been a high-profit alcohol venue on the property. We are calling it the wine empire scheme. The rumor is that Caryn has been pushing for a dedicated, modern glass and steel tasting room, a Caryn's Vineyard branding opportunity that would attract a wealthier clientele from Portland. But there is a catch. To build a facility of that size, with the parking and the septic and the patios she allegedly wants, you need prime real estate. You need the best views. And where is the best view on the farm? Right where the history stands. Let's connect the dots on why this is happening now. Matt is getting older. We know his mobility is always a factor. Maintaining old wooden structures like the western town is expensive and labor-intensive. It is easy to see how a voice in his ear, let's call it a managerial influence, could convince him that maintenance is a waste of money when you could just bulldoze it and build something new that generates passive income. But this goes beyond business. This feels personal. If you wipe out the western town and pave over Amy's garden, you are effectively exorcising the spirit of the first 30 years of the farm. You are removing the physical reminders of the previous marriage. It is a rebranding of history. It is a hostile takeover of the land's soul. Now imagine the scene. This is where the narrative becomes terrifyingly real. We have received unconfirmed accounts of an early morning operation that was meant to happen fast and quiet. The strategy was likely ask for forgiveness, not permission. If the buildings are gone before anyone raises a fuss, there is nothing left to save. Picture the sun just coming up over the Hillsborough Hills. The mist is still on the ground, and instead of the birds chirping or the sound of the mule starting up, the air is shattered by the roar of diesel engines. We aren't talking about Matt's little excavator. We are talking about commercial-grade bulldozers and grading equipment. The timeline we are piecing together suggests this was planned for a day when they thought nobody would be watching. Amy doesn't live in the big house anymore, but she still drives by. She is still part of the community, and Merrick, with his real estate background, knows exactly what land development looks like. The hook of this entire situation is the sheer audacity of it. Imagine driving past the home where you raised your 4 children, the land you poured your blood, sweat, and tears into, and seeing a demolition crew preparing to tear into the very earth that holds your memories. It's not just renovation, it's a violation. Let's dive deeper into the villain's plan aspect of this theory. Why a tasting room? Why wine? If you look at the trends in the Oregon area, vineyards are the new gold rush. Matt has dabbled in grapes before, but he's never gone full Napa Valley. The theory is that Caryn sees this as her legacy. The big house is Matt's dream. The pumpkin patch is the family's legacy. But a vineyard? A chic, modern wine bar on the property? That would be hers. That would be the stamp of the new era. It creates a revenue stream that doesn't rely on the kids. It doesn't rely on Zach or Jeremy taking over. It is a business model that cuts the children out of the equation entirely. If you turn the farm into a commercial venue for weddings and wine tastings, you don't need a legacy to pass down. You just need a manager to run the books. This aligns perfectly with the friction we've seen regarding the farm negotiations. If the goal was never to sell to the kids, but to transform the property into a commercial empire, then everything Matt has done makes sense. And the destruction of the eyesores is the first step. The term dated eyesores is allegedly the specific language used to justify this. Think about how insulting that is. The Western town isn't an eyesore. It's a monument to a father's love for his kids during a specific era. Amy's garden wasn't an eyesore. It was a biological explosion of color and care. To label them as trash to be hauled away is a psychological tactic. It minimizes the emotional value of the past to justify the financial value of the future. We believe that Matt was likely hesitant at first. He loves his projects. He loves the things he built. But we all know how the dynamic works. If he is told that the wood is rotting, that the liability insurance is too high, that the upkeep is draining the retirement fund, he will eventually cave to the logic of the ledger. And who is holding the ledger? Who is managing the day-to-day operations and the future planning? This brings us to the morning of the incident. The narrative outline suggests a level of deception that is truly shocking. Usually, for a demolition of this magnitude, there are permits posted. There are environmental surveys. Neighbors are notified. But in this scenario, it seems the plan was to clear the land first and deal with the paperwork later. This is a classic developer tactic, and it reeks of desperation to get the project moving before the family could intervene. The machinery was staged near the tree line the night before, hidden from the main road. The crew was briefed to start at 7 a.m. sharp. The objective: flatten the grade, remove the topsoil, including the rose bushes, the perennials, the decades-old bulbs Amy planted, and crush the wooden structures of the western town into debris piles. We have to speculate on Amy's position here. Even though she sold her portion of the farm, the emotional tether is never cut. She has spoken openly about how hard it is to look over the fence and see things changing. But seeing a change is one thing, seeing a destruction is another. If she drove by that morning, or if a neighbor tipped her off, the panic would have been instant. You have to understand, that garden wasn't just flowers. It was where she went when the marriage was hard. It was where she went to find peace when the cameras were too much. It is sacred ground. And the idea that it was being targeted not for safety, not for a necessary repair, but for a Caryn's Vineyard tasting room, that is the ultimate insult. It sends a message. You are gone, and we are scrubbing the final traces of you away. This connects back to the broader war for the farm. We have seen the property disputes tear the family apart. We watched the negotiations with Zach crumble. We watched the estrangement deepen. But this feels like the final nail in the coffin. If Matt and Caryn proceed with this plan, there is no going back. You cannot unbulldoze a memory. You cannot uncrush history. This is why the stakes are so incredibly high, and why we believe this story is about to explode. The imagery of Caryn, perhaps wearing a hard hat, perhaps just pointing from the seat of a utility vehicle, directing the destruction of Amy's work, is a villain arc that writes itself. But it's not fiction. It's the logical conclusion of years of resentment and business maneuvering. Now, look at the geography again, the wetland aspect. This is a crucial detail that many fans overlook. Roloff Farms sits on rich, complex Oregon soil. There are drainage issues. There are protected zones. You can't just pour concrete wherever you want, especially if you are near a natural water runoff. This is where the wine empire hits a snag. To build the kind of tasting room they allegedly want, huge patio, commercial kitchen, heavy foot traffic, you need a foundation that can support it. The garden sits on soft ground. It's lush for a reason. It's naturally irrigated. To turn that into a construction site requires massive intervention. We are talking about grading, infilling, and compacting the earth. That is what those bulldozers were there to do. They weren't just there to knock down a few walls. They were there to fundamentally alter the geology of that corner of the farm. And why the rush? Why now? The theory is that they wanted the foundation poured before the rainy season fully set in, and perhaps before the next filming cycle began. If the producers arrive and the tasting room is already under construction, it becomes a storyline about progress. If they try to do it while the cameras are rolling, it becomes a storyline about conflict. They wanted a fait accompli. They wanted to present the world with a new reality. The garden is gone, the vineyard is here, deal with it. It is a power move. It asserts dominance over the land and the narrative. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that Merrick is not just a passive observer. They forgot that Amy has eyes on the street. And they forgot that in Oregon, land use laws are incredibly strict. This sets the stage for the resistance. But before we get to the confrontation, you have to sit with the sadness of this intent. Think about the years of little people, big world we have watched. Think of the pumpkin seasons. Think of the weddings. The Western town was a character in the show. To treat it as garbage is to treat the audience's memories as garbage. And to replace it with a high-priced alcohol venue creates a barrier. It says, this farm isn't for families anymore. It's for tourists with money. The insider reports claim that Matt has been conflicted. He knows the optics are bad. He knows the fans will hate it. But the pressure to monetize, the pressure to secure his financial future independent of the kids, and the pressure from his partner to build something that is theirs rather than his and Amy's is overwhelming. The bulldozer is the instrument of that pressure. It is the physical manifestation of moving on, whether the rest of the family likes it or not. As we move into this deep dive, keep this image in your mind. The heavy steel blade of a bulldozer, hovering inches above the blooming flowers of a garden that has stood for 20 years, the engine revving, the smoke rising, and the absolute silence of the past about to be shattered by the noise of profit. This is the memorial destruction, and it was seconds away from becoming a permanent reality. We are now entering the most volatile phase of this timeline, the moment where the quiet maneuvering behind the scenes exploded into a chaotic confrontation that sources say shook the very foundations of Roloff Farms. If the bulldozer represents the erasure of the past, then what happened next represents the desperate, adrenaline-fueled fight to save it. We left you with the image of heavy machinery poised to strike, but now we need to zoom in on the person allegedly directing this operation. According to exclusive theories circulating among insiders, when the sun rose that morning, it wasn't Matt Roloff holding the clipboard. It was Caryn Chandler. The imagery described to us is striking and symbolic of the power shift we have been tracking for seasons. We are hearing reports of Caryn on site, fully in command, treating the demolition of the Western town and the garden not as a tragedy, but as a checklist. The theory of the wine empire hinges on this specific moment. Why was she there? Why was she so involved in the dirty work? Because, allegedly, this isn't just a farm project. It is her project. The tasting room, the vineyard, the Caryn's Vineyard label. Sources suggest that she was eager to break ground because once the dirt is moved, the commitment is real. You can't restore a leveled garden. You can't rebuild a vintage movie set once it has been splintered into kindling. By overseeing the demolition personally, the theory goes, she was ensuring there would be no last-minute hesitation from Matt. We all know Matt can be sentimental. We know he wavers. But with Caryn pointing out the property lines and directing the operators, the emotional hesitation is removed. She provides the ruthless efficiency that business requires. But in this context, that efficiency looks a lot like cruelty. Imagine the conversation happening over the roar of those idling engines. The operator asks where to start. Does he start with the rotting saloon facade of the western town? Or does he start with the soft earth of the flower beds? The eyesores. That word keeps coming back up in our investigation. To designate Amy's garden as an eyesore is to declare war on her aesthetic and her memory. We believe the instruction was to clear the garden first. Why? Because it's easier, it's faster, and it hurts the most. It is a psychological strike. If you pave over the flowers, you pave over the competition. It establishes a new queen of the farm. The tasting room vision requires a blank slate, and the garden was simply in the way of the profit margins. But here is where the story takes a turn that plays out like a movie script. The one variable they didn't account for was timing. We discussed earlier how Amy still drives by the farm. Whether she was heading to an appointment or perhaps dropping off grandkids, or maybe just feeling that intuitive pull that you get when something is wrong with your home, she was in the area. The timeline we are reconstructing places Amy on the perimeter road right as the first gear shifts. You have to imagine the shock. It's one thing to hear about renovations. It's another to see a yellow monster inching toward your rose bushes. The panic that must have set in is unimaginable. This isn't just land. It's her biography written in soil. Amy doesn't run to the gate. She doesn't run to Matt. She makes the one phone call that changes the trajectory of this entire event. She calls Chris Merrick. And this is why the dynamic of the show has shifted so dramatically. In the old days, Amy might have had to fight this battle alone, or yell at Matt until she was blue in the face, only to be gaslit into thinking she was being irrational. But Chris is different. Chris is a man of action. And more importantly, Chris is a real estate professional. He understands land use, he understands permits, and he understands when someone is pulling a fast one. When Amy screams into the phone that there are bulldozers in the garden, Chris doesn't ask questions. He reacts. The narrative outline describes a race against time. We are talking about a matter of minutes between the call and the arrival. The bulldozers are slow, methodical. They are positioning. They are waiting for the final go signal. This delay, likely caused by a brief discussion between Matt and the foreman about the exact grading depth, was the miracle Amy needed. We have to speculate on the atmosphere inside Chris's truck as he sped toward the farm. He knows the history. He knows how much pain that land has caused, but he also knows how much joy that specific garden brings Amy. To let it be destroyed for a wine bar without a fight? Not on his watch. This leads us to the moment of impact. The resistance arrives. We aren't talking about a polite knock on the door. We are talking about Chris Merrick's truck swinging into the driveway, bypassing the usual parking spots, and heading straight for the demolition zone. The visual here is powerful. You have the massive industrial yellow bulldozer, a symbol of corporate destruction, and you have Chris's personal vehicle, a symbol of domestic protection, putting itself directly in the line of fire. He parks the truck in front of the blade. This is the tank man moment of Roloff Farms. He physically blocks the path of destruction. The silence that follows must have been deafening. The operator kills the engine. The dust settles, and out steps Chris. Not with a smile, not with a handshake, but with the stern authority of someone who knows exactly what is happening. Amy is right behind him, likely in tears, likely trembling, but emboldened by his presence. And then, out steps Caryn from the other side, flanked by Matt. The four main players of this saga, standing on the very soil they are fighting over. This is the confrontation the cameras might have missed, or the producers are terrified to show because it breaks the friendly exes facade completely. The dialogue we are piecing together from insider leaks is explosive. Chris doesn't start with emotions. He starts with facts. He looks at the machinery, looks at the proximity to the slope, and looks at Matt. The question isn't, why are you doing this? The question is, how are you doing this? Chris knows that to bring that kind of heavy equipment onto a residential agricultural zone for a commercial build requires a mountain of paperwork. He asks the million-dollar question, where is the permit for this grade of demolition? This is where the villain's plan begins to crumble. Matt, typically the smooth talker, the negotiator, likely starts to stutter. He talks about cleanup, about maintenance, about clearing brush. He tries to minimize the operation. He tries to frame it as just a little landscaping work. But Chris isn't buying it. You don't use a D9 bulldozer to clear brush. You use it to dig foundations. You use it to prepare for concrete pours. Chris calls it out immediately. He accuses them of prepping for the tasting room before the county has even approved the zoning change. He exposes the wine empire scheme right there in the mud. And Caryn? The theory suggests she goes on the offensive. This is her dream being blocked by her ex-husband's new husband. The tension between Caryn and Amy has always been passive-aggressive, but here it allegedly turns direct. We believe Caryn doubled down on the eyesore narrative. She tells them that the farm needs to evolve, that the garden is a money pit, that the western town is a liability hazard waiting for a lawsuit. She frames the destruction as a favor to the family, a way to stop the bleeding of cash. Out with the old, in with the profit. It's a cold, calculated business stance that completely ignores the human cost. Amy's reaction here is the heart of the story. Standing in front of the machine that was seconds away from crushing her victory roses, she finds her voice. She reminds Matt that the garden was part of the agreement, maybe not in writing, but in spirit. It was the one thing she asked him to respect. To bulldoze it for a vanity project for his new girlfriend is the ultimate betrayal. It's not about the flowers, it's about erasing her footprint. It's about rewriting the history of the farm so that it looks like Amy never existed, and only Caryn remains. But the argument on the ground is just noise compared to the weapon Chris is about to deploy. As the shouting match escalates, as Matt tries to play peacemaker while Caryn pushes for the operator to restart the engine, Chris pulls out his phone. He isn't recording for Instagram. He is pulling up the county GIS maps. He is pulling up the survey data. This is the expertise of a realtor coming into play. He knows something about that specific plot of land that even Matt, in his haste to build the empire, has ignored or forgotten. This brings us to the legal loophole setup. The farm isn't just dirt. It's a complex ecosystem of drainage and setbacks. The garden sits in a very specific spot. It's low ground. It's near the creek runoff. In Oregon, environmental laws are no joke. You cannot just pave over a natural drainage point without triggering a massive EPA review. Chris starts reading the map. He looks at the setback markers. He looks at the wetland designation overlaid on the digital map. And he realizes that the bulldozer isn't just rude, it's illegal. The look on Matt's face when the word wetland is mentioned must have been pure terror. Matt knows the county inspectors. He knows the fines. He knows that if he disturbs a protected wetland setback without a survey, they could shut down the entire farm's operations. Not just the new build, everything. The pumpkin patch, the tours, the rentals. A stop work order from the county is a death sentence for a business season. And Caryn? She might not know the local codes as well. She sees this as bureaucratic nonsense, an obstacle to be bulldozed just like the flowers. She pushes back. She claims they are improving the drainage. She claims it's private property. But Chris stands firm. He stands in front of that machine with the confidence of a man who holds the trump card. He tells the operator, who is probably just a contractor wanting to get paid and go home, that if he drops that blade 1 inch, he is personally liable for an environmental violation. The operator looks at Matt. Matt looks at Caryn. Caryn looks at the garden. The air is thick with tension. This is the tipping point. The wine empire is colliding headfirst with the reality of the land and the law. We have to pause and appreciate the irony here. Matt Roloff, the man who prides himself on his vision, on his big projects, on his ability to transform the land, was allegedly about to be taken down by a zoning map on a cell phone. And the person saving the farm's legacy wasn't a Roloff by blood. It was the outsider. It was the new husband. Chris Merrick stepped into the role of protector that Matt vacated years ago. The resistance wasn't just about stopping a machine. It was about stopping a mindset. It was a rejection of the idea that profit justifies erasing history. Amy standing there, witnessing Chris fight for her memories, is a powerful redemption arc for her character. She spent years feeling pushed aside on that property. Now she has a partner who literally parks a truck in the way of the things that try to hurt her. As we wrap up this section of the investigation, the scene is frozen in a high-stakes deadlock. The engines are idling. The permit is missing. The accusation of the wetland violation is hanging in the air like smoke. Caryn is furious, seeing her tasting room plans threatened by a technicality. Matt is panicked, calculating the risk of a county audit. And Chris and Amy are standing their ground, the guardians of the garden. But the battle isn't won yet. Matt is stubborn. Caryn is persuasive. They need definitive proof. They need the county to step in. And that is exactly what happens next. Stay tuned for the final part of this saga, where we expose the legal loophole in full detail, the arrival of the official stop work order, and the ultimate victory that sees the wine empire crumble and a new symbol of resilience rise from the soil. You won't believe how close Matt came to losing it all. We are now at the breaking point of this investigation, the moment where the diesel fumes clear and the cold, hard reality of the law crashes down on the wine empire scheme. We left you with Chris Merrick standing like a sentinel in front of a piece of heavy machinery, phone in hand, staring down Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler. The engine is idling, the tension is suffocating, and the fate of Amy's garden hangs in the balance. But what happens next isn't a fistfight or a screaming match. It is a masterclass in due diligence that exposes the recklessness of this entire operation. We are calling this phase the legal loophole. But in reality, it wasn't a loophole at all. It was a trap that Caryn and Matt allegedly walked right into because they were too blinded by the potential profits of a tasting room to look at the ground beneath their feet. Chris Merrick isn't just a husband. He is a man who deals in property lines, zoning codes, and liability. When he pulled up that digital map on his phone, he wasn't looking for a property boundary. He was looking for a specific color overlay that every developer in Washington County, Oregon fears: the wetland setback. Insider theories suggest that the specific corner of the farm where Amy's garden sits, that lush, low-lying area that always blooms so beautifully, is lush for a reason. It sits directly on top of a natural drainage corridor that feeds into the local creek system. In the world of real estate development, this is a do-not-touch zone. You cannot grade it, you cannot pour a concrete slab over it, and you certainly cannot drive a 30-ton bulldozer through it without a mountain of federal and county permits. The theory is that Caryn, in her rush to get the Caryn's Vineyard project started before the rainy season, bypassed the environmental survey. Surveys take months. Surveys cost thousands of dollars. And worst of all, surveys often tell you no. We believe the strategy was to ignore the survey, scrape the land, and claim ignorance later. But Chris caught them red-handed. The dialogue we are reconstructing from source leaks is devastatingly calm. Chris reportedly turns the phone screen toward Matt and points to the blue line intersecting the bulldozer's tracks. He tells Matt that if that blade breaks the surface of the wetland buffer zone, they aren't just looking at a stop work order. They are looking at EPA violations. They are looking at fines that start at tens of thousands of dollars per day. He drops the ultimate reality check. You are about to bankrupt the farm for a wine bar that is illegal to build. Watch Matt's face in your mind's eye. This is the moment the villain's plan dissolves. Matt Roloff is a risk taker, yes. He loves to push the envelope, but he is also terrified of losing his empire to bureaucrats. The mention of wetland violation is like kryptonite to him. He knows that once the county gets involved in an environmental dispute, they open the books on everything. Every unpermitted shed, Every slightly off property line, every safety rail on the western town gets inspected. The risk isn't just the garden. The risk is the entire Roloff Farms operation being shut down for a comprehensive audit. Merrick didn't just save the flowers, he likely saved Matt from a financial catastrophe that Caryn's ambition had blinded him to. Caryn's reaction, according to the narrative we are piecing together, was not relief. It was frustrating. She allegedly tried to argue that it was just mud, that they could install a culvert, that they could fix it later. This highlights the fundamental disconnect between her vision and the reality of the land. She sees the farm as a venue. Matt and the family know it is a living ecosystem. But Matt, realizing the corner he is painted into, finally breaks. He signals the operator. He creates the cut motion across his throat. The engine revs down. The silence that returns to the farm isn't peaceful. It is heavy. It is the sound of a massive ego defeat. The bulldozer backs up, leaving deep treads in the grass but sparing the garden beds. The destruction is halted. This is the victory. But it is a messy victory. The wine empire didn't die quietly. We are hearing that the fallout from this standoff was immediate. The project was put on indefinite hold. The narrative spun to the production crew was likely about supply chain issues or rethinking the design, but we know the truth. The design was illegal, the location was impossible, and the woman who wanted to erase the past was stopped by the man who respects it. The image of the bulldozer retreating back to the barn is symbolic of the power shift. For the first time, the new era of the farm was pushed back by the old guard. But the story doesn't end with the machine leaving. It ends with what happens in the soil. Victory isn't just about stopping something, it's about planting something. In the days following the incident, after the dust settled and the threat of the county inspectors faded, Amy returned to the garden. We are hearing reports of a deeply emotional scene where she and Chris went back to the site of the near destruction. The ground was chewed up from the treads. Some of the outer bushes were damaged, but the heart of the garden was intact. And right there, in the exact spot where the blueprints showed the entrance to Caryn's tasting room, right where the manager's desk was supposed to sit, Amy made a decision. She didn't just repair the damage, she reclaimed the territory. The theory goes that Amy and Chris went to the nursery and bought the biggest, thorniest, most resilient rose bush they could find, a victory rose. They dug the hole together, right in the center of the tire tracks. Planting that rose bush was a declaration. It was Amy saying, "I am still here. My roots are still in this ground." It is a permanent biological marker that blocks any future attempt to pave that spot. Every time Matt or Caryn drives by that garden now, they don't see a tasting room. They see Amy's rose bush, thriving, blooming, and taking up the space they tried to steal. It is the ultimate passive-aggressive gardening move, and we absolutely love it. The stop work order wasn't an official paper. It was enforced by Merrick's knowledge and Amy's presence. The western town, for now, stands. The eyesores remain. And while the wine empire might be built somewhere else on the property eventually, it will not be built on the grave of Amy's memories. This event has fundamentally changed the dynamic. Matt knows now that Chris is not a pushover. He knows that he can't just bulldoze his way through the family history without a fight. And Caryn knows that her influence has a limit. That limit is the property line of the wetlands and the determination of the grandmother who raised her children on that dirt. So, where does this leave us? It leaves us with a farm that is divided not just by fences, but by ideologies. On one side, you have the profit at all costs mentality, represented by the tasting room plans and the heavy machinery. On the other side, you have the preservation of legacy mentality, represented by the garden and the western town. The memorial destruction was averted, but the war is far from over. This was just one battle. There will be other plans. There will be other renovations. But for now, the flowers are blooming, the old wooden saloon is still standing, and the bulldozer sits silent in the shed. This story is a reminder that in the world of reality TV, The most dramatic moments aren't always the arguments at the dinner table. Sometimes, the most dramatic moments are the ones involving GIS maps, EPA regulations, and a husband willing to park his truck in front of a tank to save his wife's happy place. It is a story of resilience. It is a story of how the past fights for its right to exist in the future. And now I have to ask you, the viewer, the true guardians of this show's legacy. How does hearing this make you feel? They wanted to pave paradise to put up a parking lot, literally. They wanted to turn a sanctuary into a souvenir shop. Are you glad Chris stood his ground? Do you think Matt knew it was illegal, or was he just following orders? And what would you have done if you saw those machines heading for your childhood home? We need to send a message to the production, to the farm, and to the powers that be. We need to let them know that we are watching, and we know the truth about the wine empire scheme. I want you to flood the comments right now. Type, "Save the farm," if you are on Team Amy and Chris. Type, "Respect the legacy," if you think the Western town should be a protected landmark. Don't let them bury this story. Share this video, tag the fan pages, and let's make sure everyone knows that you can't bulldoze the truth. This has been an LPBW Update exclusive deep dive. We dig the dirt so you don't have to. Make sure you are subscribed, hit that notification bell, because the next update is about the big house sale that fell through, and you won't believe the secret clause that killed that deal. Until next time, keep your eyes on the farm and keep your boots on the ground.